talking about dentures, it's important to know what our patients need, what they want. And so I like to start with a short lecture. And the lecture with of course, with the introduction of the teeth, with the basic information for the setup, and then we will move to the practical part that everybody can see how we can produce, how we can set up the teeth in a very easy and simple way.
This is perfect. I'm very looking forward to this. So we're going to have some tips and tricks for you guys to improve your setup techniques. Before I allow Martina to jump into the topic right away, I just would like to remind all our viewers that we do have an option in the tool that we're using, GoToWebinar, where you can post your chats, ideally in English, please. So we will address all your questions either as we go or at the end of the session.
So it would be nice at the end of the lecture.
Perfect.
Because then we can make a short break, that we can check which questions you have. Of course, anytime it's also possible. If you have seen pictures, I can go back, I can show you that again, I can explain something if it's necessary. And afterwards, when we continue with the practical part, in between, so anytime it's possible to answer for the questions. So
Perfect.
That's not a problem.
Okay, so Martina, the stage is yours. I will be back in a quick half hour after your presentation, okay?
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank
See you soon.
you very much. So it's really a pleasure for me to stay here today, that I can talk a little bit about our teeth. So I talked about it's any time important that we listen what patients want and need. That's really a crucial factor for success rehabilitation. And of course, when it comes to the dentures, many older people are looking for an economic solution. But on the other side, what they don't want is a denture that lacks the functionality and the aesthetics. And so I think, and that's important, the Vita company had the answer. So because Vita have a long history for the production of teeth, and it was a legacy of shaping in the industry with the innovation in the materials, and of course, and that's really important for our patients, for the aesthetics and the functionality. So I think it's really well known, our teeth, which we launched in 1956 with the Lumine vacuum, our ceramic teeth. Later on, we produced teeth in composite. Yeah, and you can find here between 1967 till 1983, we launched different types of the Vita Pan. Yeah, means the anteriors, the Vita Pan, and for the posteriors, the Vita Pan cuspiform and Vita Pan cyniform. So the shape of these teeth are exactly the same like the posteriors of Lumine vacuum. In the area between 1998 and 2001, we launched in the market the Vita Physiodents. At this time, we produced the first time a tooth which was really very, very natural. So, of course, anytime we need new aspects for the setups, we get new concepts, new ideas how we can set up our teeth. And so we created in 2007 the Vita Lingoform, a special tooth for the posteriors, that we can use these teeth for a special concept, the lingualized occlusion. 2008, and that's exactly the tooth where we like to talk today about. It's the Vita MFT, the multifunctional tooth. And here you can find the combination of the high aesthetic and also the functionality for our different types of setups. So later on, we continued with different types of anteriors. In 2011, Vita Plus, and the last launched of our anteriors were 2017, the Vita XL. So now you can see we have the different types of teeth for the anteriors, for the posteriors. And with the different types of teeth, we also offer the different concepts. But anytime, and that's important, so that we have a fabrication process, and this process is anytime the same. Yeah, there are many different steps, so we can see that here between the laboratory and the praxis by the dentist, and so that's anytime the same. Yeah, so maybe short information. So we start with the anatomical impression, produce the models, and produce the functional impression tray. With these functional impression, the dentist can, with the functional the impression tray, the dentist can make the functional impression. Then we produce the functional models, prepare the bite rims, yeah, and then we will get the bite recording by the dentist, yeah, and have the possibility to mount our models at the articulator. We can select our tooth, means the dentist should do that because the dentist can see the patient, yeah. Then the next step would be the setup of the teeth, the anteriors and the posteriors. Then we can make a try-in by the dentist, invest our dentures, yeah, and after the polymerization, we can finish that. We have the final check and can issue the dentures. So only a short overview. The next point is the anatomy. Yeah, the anatomy of the different bite classification, and we can see that here. We have 3 different situations. It's classification in according to angle. Class 1, that's the normal occlusion or neutral occlusion. Class 2, the distal occlusion. We can see that here. Yeah, and last but not least, class 3, the mesial occlusion with an inverted anterior overbite. And so anytime, and that's also important, so that we can see the normal occlusion, the vestibular buccal area, yeah, the cross bite and the edge-to-edge bite. So sometimes it's also necessary to find out which type of anteriors we have to use. So because especially if we have edge-to-edge bite, so we would choose also teeth with a more straight incisal area and so on. For the setup and also for the mounting, we can find different planes and lines for the reference. That means we have here different lines like the compass plane, the occlusal plane, the Frankfurt horizontal plane, which we can use for the mounting of the models, and we can also use it during our setup. Depends to the different types of concepts. We can also use different types of curves for the setting up, means the curve of Spey. That's a curve which has an arch-shaped progression in the sagittal direction, yeah, and the curve of Wilson, yeah, which is represented by line connections, the cusps of the lower posteriors in the transversal direction. That's anytime important. So because up to the different concepts, we work with both of curves, the curve of Spey, curve of Wilson. Sometimes, for example, with a lingualized occlusion, we would reduce the curve of Wilson. But I will talk later about this point. Okay.
Thank you, Martina.
Okay,
Sorry.
it's okay. Good. Okay, so then we can continue. That would be the next point if we like to mount our models. So anytime we should use an articulator, that means we need a device which simulate the different movements by the patients. Means the opening and closing movements, and of course also the lateral and the protrusion movements, as well as the retrusion movements. That's really important that we can check all different situations which the patient use during the chewing, during the talk, and so on. Yeah. With the articulator, it's also important that we can work here with a Bonwell triangle. That's important because we can find here an equilateral triangle that runs from the mandibular central incisal point to both centers and the right and the left condyles. That's important because later on we can use an elastic band, and it corresponds to the occlusal plane, means we can use that later on if we set up our lower anteriors. Before we start with the setup, so first of all, we have to check our models. Everything, what we have to do for the selection of the teeth, for the setup, we can find that, we can read that at the models, and so we start at first with a model analysis. So later on, you can see that we have different sketches at the upper and the lower jaw, but I will talk about this theme a little bit later. Yeah. The next point with the tooth selection, that's also very important because it's based on the patient's offspring, the nose size, the width, the head, the jaw shape, and so on. The easiest way would be if the dentist give us a little bit information that we know exactly which shape we should take. Sometimes it's not possible. We don't get this information. And so we can also check the shape of the jaw. Yeah, if it's more a square, oval, and so on, maybe then we can directly choose in combination the right shape of the teeth. If we have done that, of course, then we can start with the setup. Also here, we have basic information for the positioning of the anteriors, for the positioning at the upper and the lower setup, means anytime what we should do, the central incisors should positioned anytime parallel to the pupil line, and correspond to the positive smile line in the arch. Also here you can see the different pictures by the setup of the lower teeth with the labial view and also the proximal view. Yeah, but we will talk about this theme also at the practical part. So there are basic information how we have to set up the teeth, but of course, anytime it's also possible to work more individual. And I think that's important. So think about what we like to do. We like to concentrate to the wishes of our patients too. Means then we can also work a little bit more individual. Sometimes we get also a situation model that we can check that, and that we can produce nice dentures for our patients. With the setup of the interiors, so normally that's anytime the same process, yeah, individual for our different setup concepts. And now it's important. If we like to work with the posteriors, first of all, we have to know, yeah, which type of concept we like to use. And so you know that. So we have different possibilities. So we have the situation that we can use the tooth-to-tooth setup, the tooth-to-two-tooth setup. We can use the lingualized occlusion. And that's important that we know exactly what we like to do. Yeah, and special for these different concepts, we offer the different types of materials. And now it's also important. So you can see that we have the Vita XL, the Vita linguform, Vita with the posteriors, cuspiform and sinoform. And we have the MRP material, that means the microfiller reinforced composite material. And for the MFT, we use here the high cross-link polymer. For our indications, yeah, we can, oh, that's the next picture, sorry. Yeah, for the indications, so we have also a recommendation how we can use the teeth and for what we can use the teeth. And so we have here our basic prosthetics, the premium and the universal prosthetic, and last but not least, of course, also the digital prosthetics. Anytime it's important what we like to do. So for example, today we are talking about the Vita MFT. With the Vita MFT, we recommend to use that for the full dentures and the partial dentures. And of course, if we like to work more individual, maybe also with the implant retained dentures, so we also recommend to use here Vita XL, Vita Plus for the interiors, for the posteriors, the linguform. Oh, sorry, I couldn't find it. Yeah, and now it's important. That's a recommendation by the company, but anytime, and that's important, of course, if we like to work with the implant, if we like to produce implant with the dentures, so of course it's also possible to work with the MFT. Important that we use here exactly the lingualized occlusion. So last but not least, I have talked about the digital dentures. At the moment, it's possible to use it for full dentures and also for partial dentures. Okay, but let us talk about the MFT. That's really important. So because here we use that for a simple, rapid tooth selection. That means we have a very compact, clearly arranged tooth assortment. We can use that for different types of concepts. That's also important. MFT. So we have here the multifunctional occlusal surface. Special if we are talking about multifunctional tooth. So, of course, the occlusal surface is special prepared, means at the lower jaw for the lower teeth, we have a pre-abraded occlusion, means that is also a point, very important, that we can reduce our grinding work. And of course, we have here a simple setup. So we have talked about, or I have talked about the material. So special here, we use a proven polymer material, which has a highly cross-linked matrix of MMA and cross-linked monomers. That's important that we have really a good mechanical stability and surface resistance. Of course, sometimes depends to our denture, the situation, especially if we are talking about implant denture. So anytime it's also important that we check which concept we use for the setup. Yeah, I think that's really important. So if we are talking about our occlusal concept, we can use that for the lingual and also for the balanced occlusion, because I think most of you are working maybe with a balanced occlusion. Yeah, and for example, we can use the concepts in according to Gysi, to Professor Gerber, and also according to RFP, APF, and TIF. There are special occlusal concepts which we can find here in Germany. For our assortment, we offer here 13 Vita System 3D Master shades, yeah, plus 2 bleached shades, yeah, and for the classical shades, A1, A3, C3, and T3. For the complete kit, we find here our mold chart. And of course, also there you have the different shapes, ovoid, triangular, rectangular, and square. We have 5 different lower anterior sets. And of course, in combination, and you can find that at the combination table, the posteriors, where you can find 3 different 3 different sets. So if we're talking about the MFT, so again, we have to listen to the wishes of our patients. And of course, it's also important that we get a high aesthetic with the setup of our dentures. And that's really important that we can find here the opalescence, the luminescence, and also a translucency, and get with these different options a very strong play of colors, rich in the nuances. Yeah, and also with the surface, with the natural morphology and individual structure of the mamelons, we can really produce a lifelike light reflection for our dentures. The next point, and I think that's also important. So first of all, here you can see the mamelons, you can see the translucency of the teeth. Then we have also a slightly convex design of the labial surfaces, yeah, for the homogeneous lip contour. Also, very important point are the, go to the other side, the design of the palatal surface, because that's important for the conversation of the phonetics and also the natural tongue sensation. Sometimes it depends, yeah, that's not for each set, but sometimes we can also find these white borderline, also very nice for the natural aesthetic. So we talked about that we can work individual for the setup. And of course, that's not only the setup of the teeth, it's also the modulation of the gingiva. So the next point is the setup of the teeth. So we are talking about the multifunctional tooth, and we're talking about a very easy setup. Yeah, and that's important. So I have talked about the abrasion at the lower posteriors, because here we have a degree between 15 and 20. And so it's really possible to minimize the horizontal shear forces. And you can see that it's really a very easy way. So that's also the way what I'm doing during the setup. So first of all, I set up the lower and upper anteriors, then the lower posteriors, and then I continue with the first molar at the upper jaw. And you can see that the tube will find exactly the right position in combination to the lower anteriors. We can also check the contact points, of course, and then we can continue with the premolars. Yeah, the second and the first premolar sometimes depends to the space. Sometimes maybe it's necessary to grind a little bit at the proximal area. But the most important thing is that we find exactly the right contact position between the upper and the lower jaw. And that's exactly the point. It's really easy, and it's really an easy centric, and that's a very easy and also a fast way to set up the dentures. Okay, what have we to do? Yeah. So first of all, what we get is the mounted articulator, so that we have our models with the bite registration. The easiest way is if we get some sketches by the dentist, and you can see that here what we need. So I talked about the setup of the lower teeth, means we use our occlusal plane, yeah, to find exactly where we have to set up the teeth. And you can see that it runs exactly through the lower bite rim. Then we should have our midline, the canine line, and the smile line. With this information, it's really possible to know exactly where we have to set up the anteriors. We know exactly the length of the teeth. And of course, we also know how the width should be, yeah, between the first incisor and the tip of the canine. Sometimes, of course, if we don't get into this information, so we have checked all these points directly at our models. So the next point would be the model analysis. Yeah, and that's really important. What we need is at the upper jaw, the incisal papilla. We mark the large palatal ridge, the center of the alveolar ridge, the midline of the model, the maxillary cusps, yeah, the palatal vibrating line. That's not so necessary for the setup, yeah, and what we need is the canine point. At the lower jaw, we should mark here the retimolar pad, the center of the alveolar ridge at the anterior teeth and for the lateral side. So then, of course, also here the midline of the model, we need the borderline for the distal side of the last molar, and of course the deepest point of the shape of our jaw. So we can see that here. We mark the retromolar pad. Then it's important that we really find out the right position for the canines. So sometimes if we mark the points directly at the jaws, sometimes we don't have enough space. So means we should use the position of the first premolar. And then we have a little bit more space, especially here for the anteriors. Yeah, for the borderline, that's important. Yeah, that we really check that. First of all, what we shall do is to sketch here the shape of the jaw at the border of the model. Then we find out the deepest point. Means here we have the position for the largest chewing unit. Yeah, of course, anytime plus minus 1 millimeter. Yeah, and of course, with the information, we can use here an angle of 20.5 till 25 degree in accordance to Professor Gerber. And here we can check out our stop line. And that's really important. So because behind this stop line, we shouldn't set up teeth. For the upper jaw, okay, for the upper jaw, it's exactly the same. So we start here for the sketching the position of the second, for the first premolar. Take the highest point of take the highest point at the back side, and then we can also mark here the midline of our alveolar ridge and know exactly where we can set up our teeth. Okay, with the mounting of the models. So, just a moment. Yeah, here we can see that, sorry. So here we can find our elastic band. We use this position for the lower wax rim. Then we can mount our models and we know exactly where we have to set up our teeth. So what I'm doing, I start at the lower teeth. Yeah, in accordance to the level of the elastic band. Then I continue with the anteriors at the upper jaw. And of course, so that's also important. So because between the upper and the lower jaw, we have an overjet. And of course, we need the overbite. And that should be exactly correspondent between both, yeah, that we can use it for our movements. Yeah, here you can see the setup for all anteriors. If we open the articulator, so anytime it should be parallel between the upper and the lower teeth. Depends to our sets which we use. Yeah, so sometimes we can find it really that the tip of the canine at the position at the distal area of the lower canine. We can work individual, depends to the wishes of the patient. Yeah, and now it's important what we like to do. If we have the setup with the buccal contacts, so it's exactly the same. We follow the information by our occlusal plane, use the information about the curve of Spey and the curve of Wilson to set up our posteriors. So anytime the main fissure should run exactly at the level of the midline of the alveolar jaw. And then we can continue with the positioning of the upper teeth. Means we know exactly our contact points and can set up the teeth now step by step. We start with the first molar, the second premolar, and the first premolar up to our sketches. Yeah. We can also finish the setup with the second molar. Yeah, especially if we are talking about the balanced occlusion, means during the movements, we will have anytime our contact positioning between the upper and the lower jaw at the working, and also here you can see that at the balance side. Yeah, that's important. But sometimes that's at the other hand. So we have these type of the play of forces, and that's really important because sometimes, yeah, we have different force vectors which affect our teeth, and that's important. So because if we have the roots, there's no problem, that's clear. But if we produce our dentures, yeah, so then sometimes we get really the problems with aesthetic. What we can do, we can work with the implants, of course, so then we can improve the fixation of the dentures. But, and that's really very important, if we work with the horizontal shear forces, means with, for example, with a balanced occlusion, so then these forces can also affect the implants till the sacrifice. And of course, we like to reduce that. Means we need a stabilization of the mandible and the maxilla. We have to reduce the horizontal shear forces, and we need the force vector in the axial direction. And especially for this way, we work with a lingualized setup. Now you can see we have reduced our contact points. Yeah. We can find that only at the palatal cusps at the upper jaw and at the fissure at the lower jaw. And here it's also important that we change a little bit the setup of the posteriors. And we can see that here for the lower posterior. Think about, I talked about the curve of Spey and the curve of Wilson. For the lingualized occlusion, we use only the curve of Spey, and the cusps between the lingual and the buccal side should be parallel, so that we don't set up the curve of Wilson. That's important. And then it's exactly the same situation for the upper jaw. We continue with the first molar. Also here you can see that we have reduced our contact points. We can continue with the premolars, the second one, the first one, also with the reduction of the contact points. Yeah, and that's the way how we can work very fast, very easy, and with the stabilization of our dentures. That's really important. Up to the pre-operated occlusal surface at the lower jaw, we can, of course, control the movements by the patients. Yeah, and then we will see that we can work without these horizontal shear forces. And that's really a very important point, especially for implant weird dentures, because there we have really a very high pressure. The patient has no chance to check it. And so it's so important that they use really the right concept for the setup. And the most important thing is, yeah, that the buccal side is completely open. That's important for the patient. So during the centric, he can find his contact points. he can find the centric, and during the movements, we reduce the horizontal shear forces. That's important. Last but not least, I would like to give you short information for a clinical case. This case is produced by Darius Norday from Australia. And for example, here we have a patient. He was not so satisfied because we can see at the initial situation that we have not really a good bite situation. You can also see that here for the posteriors. The patient has had problems to find the centric. Yeah, and also there, if you see here the combination teeth and gingiva, it's not really natural. So special here, Darius work here with a situation in resin and had make the reproduction of the initial situation with a new setup. Yeah, and you can see that now. Here we have our setup more individual. Yeah, we can find here the normal class 1. Yeah, with a normal overbite. And with the contact position, you can also find here exactly the situation what I have shown you before. Our contact points will be found mainly at the buccal, the palatal cusp of the posterior, and also in the centric. Yeah, in the centric, you will see that we have the normal class 1. We can find that with a normal overbite. Special here, think about the stop line. We have set up the teeth only till the first molar. Of course, anytime we have to check that afterwards, after the finishing, at the articulator, of course, later on, also at the patient's mouth. Then you can see that we have a very nice aesthetic with the teeth, directly also here with the lip contours. Everything is perfect. Yeah, you can find also the individual characterization by the teeth. It's very natural, and I think that's what our patients want. Okay, so that means, especially for the patients, yeah, we have more tongue space and get a greater comfort. Less biting of the cheek. That's important because we have reduced the buccal contacts. Yeah, we can reduce the pressure areas. Yeah, and we have really only small regulatory checking movements. Yeah. For the technicians and for the laboratory, so we have anytime a clear, unmistakable contact relationships. Yeah, it's really understandable for the setup criteria, and of course, I think that's also important. We have time saved working steps. Yeah, special for our setup. Okay, that should be the short introduction of the MFT for the setup. So now the question, do you have any questions at the moment?
Not for the time being. I think our audience is saving all the questions for the practical part.
Okay.
By the way, I remind everybody, please, and I urge everybody to use the chat option to ask any questions now that Martina will actually test our new overhead camera, which has been installed yesterday. Hope everything is okay. Lily, I hope that the viewing of the PowerPoint was now better with the adjustment of the camera. Hope you guys managed to see the presentation better. Martina, while you set up, I think today it's an important date for you. 2 years ago, where were you 2 years ago?
Exactly. 2 years ago, I was in Hanoi.
In Hanoi.
That was exactly the last day of my trip to Hanoi. Yeah, we were there for an exhibition. Maybe Robert is listening, or also the staff. And may he can also remember that was really a very, very nice day with the group. So that we have a sightseeing tour, and that was really very nice.
That's wonderful, and it's amazing how this webinar fell on this
and
day.
It's exactly the same day.
Okay, let's hope to be able to go back and visit Robert in person very soon. Yeah. Let's hope so.
Okay, so I forgot something.
Yes. How can I help?
I would I need a lighter.
You need a lighter.
Yes. Do you have one?
Yes.
So because you,
I am a smoker.
Thank you very much.
So I do have a lighter.
I stopped, and so I never have that with me.
That's in my plan as well, but I keep on postponing till tomorrow.
Okay, so first of all, what I like to show you is the situation, what we can find. Which we can find at the lab side. So just a moment, I have to prepare that here a little bit. That you can also see the details. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
So just a moment. Okay, so that's the situation which we also can find at the laboratory during our daily work. So we have here our wax rims, the upper, the lower jaw. Yeah, we can, and that's important, we can use here our elastic band. Yeah. And with the elastic band, we can also find the bone wall triangle. And that's important, during the mounting, we should control that we have here with the elastic band the same level of the occlusal plane. Means later on we can use this information because we know exactly where we have to set up our lower teeth. That's the international standard to set up the lower teeth in according to these occlusal plane. If we have an articulator with the incisal pin, so it's exactly the same. We have here the contact to the lower labial area of our lower wax rim. And now we know exactly where we have to set up the first incisor. So then if we have sketches by the dentist, means the midline, the canine line, the smile line. So then we have also information where we can set up our teeth, which set we have to use, because anytime, and you can see that here, just a moment. Oh, it's moving. That's perfect.
It's moving.
It's perfect. So that's the first time that I work here with these type of camera. I think you cannot really read that. So what I have, or what I like to use is the shape R47 in combination with L 37, and for the posteriors, I use PU and PL 31. So of course, what we can take our combination table to find out the right size in combination. What I'm doing, first of all, I take the right anteriors, and afterwards for the posteriors, I really measure the space, yeah, and take then the right side in accordance to our jaw, patient's jaw.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, what we should do is to sketch some important points and lines for the model analysis. So just a moment. Ah. No, I need my glasses before I start with the work. Sorry for that.
No.
Okay. So first of all, what we are doing, we mark the incisor papilla. Yeah. Then the horizontal midline. So it's a little bit different that you can really see that. Maybe it's not so accurate because you can see that, but I cannot really check it because then I would need here the complete. Can you see? Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, so we start with the horizontal midline, then the midline to which we transfer to the model. Then I mark here the first alveolar ridges. That's also important because it's also possible that we connect the tips. Yeah, and at this position, we know that around about 9 till 11 millimeters before this tip, we find the positioning of the canines. So then it's also important what we need is the midline of our alveolar jaw at the posterior area. And that's important that we transfer anytime these lines to the border of the model.
Until the end, yeah?
Yes, exactly.
Why is that, may I ask?
So that's important because that's the positioning for the posteriors.
Okay.
And of course, later on, we cover with the base our model. Mm-hmm. And so it's important that I also need here the sketches on the border of the model. Yeah, that I can follow later on exactly these lines. So for the lower jaw, it's a little bit similar. So first of all, we start here with the retromolar pad. Mark the horizontal midline and the vertical midline. And so anytime it's a little bit different. Yeah. So I talked about that we should mark the positioning of the first premolar. Sometimes it depends. So we can also take here our flat pencil, mark the area between the roundabout between the first premolar and the first molar. And now we can connect that with the sketches of the vertical midline of the pet. And that's exactly the same. We will transfer that to the labial side at our model. Yeah. So then the next point will be the midline of the alveolar ridge for the anteriors. We mark here the midline of the model. Yeah. And last but not least, and that's important, so that we also mark the shape of our jaw at the border of the model. And we use here a special tool prepared according to Professor Gerber, that we have the possibility to sketch, just a moment, sorry, to sketch exactly the shape of the jaw at our model. I'm not sure if you, yeah, you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We do that at both sides. Okay, so then the next point would be that we need a parallel line. So we can use here the mounting plate to find out the parallel line. So I have to go outside of the picture that I can sketch it. So I think you can see that now. Yeah. Then we take a line, yeah, in a right angle at the deepest point, plus minus 1 millimeter. And there is the position of the first molar. So for the next step, to find out our stop line, we use here the special angle from 20.5 degree. Get the contact to the distal area. Oops. Get the contact to the distal area of our jaw, and also there we will set a line, and that's our stop line. Means behind this line we shouldn't set up a tooth. And sometimes it happens, if we have not enough space, that we set up our denture only till the first molar. Okay, we do that at both sides. So sometimes, yeah, and if we don't have these strong inclination of our jaw, then we use for the stop line the lower part of the retromolar pad. Okay, so that's all. Now we can start with the setup. So first of all, what we have to do, we have to prepare our denture base. So we can use wax. we can use a special acrylic material. So you can find different types what we can use for our patients. Yeah, the most important thing is it should be stable, especially if we make our try-in, our wax try-in. So it should be stable for maybe half an hour at the patient's mouth. Okay, and then we can start with the setup. First of all, I will isolate the model.
So what is that you're spreading on?
So that's separating liquid, which we use between plaster and wax. Yeah, that's the normal way. And now we can start with the production. And so I think, let me see. So that we can check that a little bit.
Yes.
So because anytime that's important. So now we have the different working steps. And of course, here for the webinar, I don't produce everything. So it's a little bit like a cooking show.
Okay.
So that I have prepared something.
Are we going to taste something at the end?
The taste, yeah, we will see. So for the taste, we need our patient. He can try that later.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now it's important. So what we are doing, let me check that. What we are doing now, first of all, we have to set up our lower anteriors. And you can see that now. What I have done, so because I have prepared really each step that you can see that. So first of all, during our setup, we check the inclination of our teeth from the labial view and also from the proximal view. Yeah, that's the first point. According to the mounted models, we have now the chance that we have the contact between the incisal pin and the incisal edge of the lower teeth. And the next step, what we are doing, we check. Let me see. So here you can see it. We check the contact between the incisal edges and the occlusal plane. And that's really important, yeah, that we set up now our lower anteriors in accordance to the occlusal plane. That's also important because later on, if we start or if we continue with the upper teeth, so we need our overbite. Depends how strong it should be. Sometimes we get the information by the dentists. If not, so I prefer overbite about 2 millimeters, around about 2 millimeters. Yeah. So that means what we are doing now, we set up the anteriors at the lower jaw, and now I can also start with our working part. Sorry.
Whoa.
Okay. Can you give Tanya the information that she should bring me another Bunsen burner?
Bunsen, yes, sure.
Yes, please.
I'll be right back.
So I'm sorry, we have a short interruption. Let me see. I will go back. I have a little, what I'm using here is a Bunsen burner, but it's not working. I'm sorry for that. Yeah, so the colleague will go and will bring a new one. But anytime, so in between, what we should do, and that's really important. So very often I get the question, shall we start at the upper or shall we start at the lower jaw? And of course, anytime you will be free. Yeah, the most important is to know exactly which information we get by the dentist. If he is sketching at the wax rims exactly the length of, let me see, I go back. Yeah, if he give me here the sketches for the length of the upper teeth, then of course I can prepare key, yeah, to find out later on the length, and then I can start with the upper teeth. That's really not a problem. Yeah, we can do that. But if we don't have these information, so anytime we should start with a lower jaw, because then we know exactly that the occlusal plane runs here exactly at the level of the lower jaw, and we know exactly at which position with yeah, at which position we can set up the lower teeth. That's exactly the point. Yeah, and sometimes I know that. So when I traveled around the world and talked with technicians, that they are talking about that sometimes the upper teeth are not long enough, and that's exactly this point. So the occlusal plane, yeah, runs exactly at the lower jaw, and the upper jaw should be about the overbite, 2 millimeters, yeah, below this occlusal plane. And that's really important. So then I wait for my colleague that I get another Bunsen burner. Let me check that again. Maybe it's not working. Oh, maybe now I can use that. Okay. So then I will go back. Just a moment that I can find the right position. Okay. So I think I can start now with the setup. So of course the first incisor are fixed, and now I can continue with the lateral. And that's exactly the point. So if we set up the lower anteriors, so first of all, we check from the labial side the inclination. The inclination should be slightly to the slightly distally with the cervical part. If we check that from the proximal side, the lateral should be straight. So then the other side, it's exactly the same. Yeah. Slightly to the distal area with the neck, and from the proximal straight. So that's the same. So if we set up the teeth, so the both the lateral incisor will come a little bit more to the vestibular area. Then we check that again with the elastic band. Let me see if I can show you that exactly. Yeah, that we have exactly the level of our occlusal plane. And then we can continue with the canine. Yeah, with the canine, it's anytime the same steps. First of all, we set up the canine. We check exactly the inclination. Yeah, should be straight or also a little bit to the distal area by the neck. We grade with the setup. Oops. We grade with the setup our labial bow. Let me fix that a little bit. Okay. And then the other side. Okay. So now we can check the level of the teeth. We can check that here with the elastic band. And you can see that the tip of the canine can situate it slightly above the occlusal plane, but only, let me see, only here a little bit by the tip. You can see that here perfectly. Okay. Okay, now it's working better. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so any questions for the setup for the lower teeth?
Not for the moment.
No?
Again, please
Okay.
remember about the chat option. And
Okay.
yes, Dr. Venzer, we are Boy Scouts.
Yeah, so I have also changed that now, so you can see that that's a prepared setup, but it's exactly the same. You can see that the tip of the canine is a little bit above the occlusal plane. Yeah, the incisor are exactly at the occlusal plane. And then we can continue with the upper teeth. So also there for the upper, I prepared the first incisor, because that's now important that we have really the same level between the overbite and the overjet. Yeah, you can see that here. And we shouldn't have contact between the upper and the lower jaw during the centric. Depends, of course, to the occlusion concept. Yeah, and then we can continue with the upper teeth. Let me fix a little bit the base. Okay, and that's now exactly the same. Wait, that I have the right position. That you can follow the setup. Okay. No, just a moment, sorry. Okay, so it's better. No, that's sometimes it's a little bit the problem because with the lower it's okay, but with the upper I don't find enough space for the upper jaw. That's the point. Okay, so then we can continue. And now it's exactly the same. I set up the teeth, that I have a nice face bow, of course, anytime in accordance to the lower teeth. I check that. I check the length of the second incisor should be positioned a little bit higher, like the first incisor. Depends to the complete overbite. So I prefer a step between 1 millimeter. But it depends also a little bit to the shape of the teeth. Yeah, it's exactly the same. I control the setup. I open the articulator a little bit, that we can check the parallel setup. And last but not least, I can fix the canines. Yeah, it's exactly the same for both sides.
Okay, Martina,
Yeah.
we're starting to get a few questions. Is it okay while you work if I read them to you?
Yes, sure.
Okay, good. So in this case, the bite plane is decided by the length of the upper incisors. How can we set up the lower incisors?
Once again.
Okay. In the case the bite plan is decided by the length of the upper incisor,
okay.
how can we set up the lower incisor?
Okay, so very easy. So I have talked about that. So what we are doing, so when I have, let me see that you can see that. So for example, I have talked about this point before. If we have the information by the dentist that we know exactly the length of the upper incisor, so we start here with the upper jaw, with the upper denture, set up the teeth. Wait a little bit that I can fix it. And then it's exactly the same. When I have to continue now with the lower teeth, so first of all, let me see, I have to apply a little bit wax, a wax rim. Then it's exactly the same. What we have to know is the level of our overbite. Yeah. For example, so I talked about that I use in average 2 millimeters. Sometimes we get the information by the dentist. Yeah. Sometimes we use only 1 millimeter. It depends. So I know that. Very often, if we have special also really older people who don't really find anytime the right centric, we reduce a little bit the overbite. Yeah, and what now I'm doing. So I have the position of, you cannot see that exactly because I need the pin in the anterior part. So then I try that. Yeah, I set up the teeth here in the position in accordance to the anteriors. And now I have to check that. So for example, yeah, you can see that the overjet is a little bit too strong, means that I have to change the position of the lower tooth. And if I have found it, so it's exactly the same. That I set up now the lower anteriors in accordance to our setup for the upper anteriors. Yeah. So if I get the information to set up at first the upper one, so then with the lower one, I only check the overbite and the overjet. At this moment, I don't set up the lower anteriors in accordance to the occlusion plane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I hope this answers your question. There's a compliment and a comment coming from Australia from our good friend Darius. So he noticed that your wax knife is a little bit bent. So he will send you one. So please do expect a package from Buderin. However, the setup is looking great. So this is ultimately the most important thing.
So so I'm waiting for a new wax knife. Thank you.
So Darius,
nice.
You're being held accountable now. We're waiting for this.
Yeah, and so that you can see that I can also work with these next wax knife. You can see now here is the finished set up for the anteriors. Yeah, and now we can see that we have our overbite. We have our let me see, our overjet. Yeah, and that's now the point that we can check the space for the posteriors. And with a space, we can choose the right size for the posteriors. Yeah, you have seen we have 3 different sizes. So it's not any time necessary to use exactly the size by the information of our table, of course. Yeah, so because each jaw is different, and so we should really check that. Okay, so if we have set up the anteriors, so now it's also important. So just a moment, I have to fix fix my dentures at the model. Okay. So, and now I can start with the posteriors. And of course, now it's important that we know exactly which type of concept we like to follow. because it's a little bit different if we like to set up the balanced occlusion or the lingualized occlusion. Yeah, and that's really important. And of course, so that would be the next step. So here you can see that now one side is ready, and so I took here the information by the lingualized occlusion means. So if we, let me see if I can show you that a little bit better. No. Here you can see that. Yeah, we have set up the curve of Spee. Yeah, that we used here the setup without the curve of Wilson. I will do that at the other side. Okay. Enough time, Amy, or?
Yes, we're looking good on time. We're looking good on time. Actually, a question on time. How long does it take for an experienced technician to set up a full denture from A to Z?
That's different. That's really different. So because depends. If you, it depends a little bit to the education at the laboratory, because it's so different. So for example, in Australia, I know that you have the dentures, and that the laboratories, they produce only dentures. And I think if the technician had the chance to produce daily the dentures, so then it's really a short time.
Yes.
And of course it depends, because especially in Australia or for the denturists, so you have a complete other education. Like I'm talking about the normal education for the technicians who makes everything. Okay. Yeah, that's a little bit different, and that's also different at the laboratories, because, for example, here in Germany, sometimes it's really the problem that we don't work very often with full dentures.
Okay.
That the technicians don't get this experience. Yeah, and of course, anytime the easiest way is to have the contact to the dentist. And that's exactly the same here in Germany. Technicians who work for prosthesis, they don't have the contact to the dentist. Only technicians who work with ceramic. That's a big problem. And so I think to have really the experience you need, I cannot really say that. Also depends to the technicians. But I think you need 5-6 years, because anytime if you think you are ready and you catch every different types, so you will find a new patient with complete other situations. Yeah. And you start again.
It's always, do and learn.
Anytime. So, okay, if we start now with the setup of the lower posteriors. So anytime what I'm doing, I set up the first premolar here with a space to the canine, because at the end, sometimes we can see the position in combination between the anteriors and the posteriors, and sometimes it's really necessary to change the position of the canine, and that's much easier if we have here these light space. Yeah. Then the second premolar. So then I can also, just a moment, I can also check that here with the occlusal plane. Just a moment. I need the other direction.
Better.
Yeah. So then we can see that the first premolar, you can see that the tip should be located with the tip a little bit above the occlusal plane. The second molar, premolar, sorry, should be directly in contact to the occlusal plane. That's the same with the first molar. Yeah, and the second molar, we have the contact with the mesio buccal and the mesiolingual cusp. The distal side should be located slightly above the occlusal plane. Again, can you see that? Yeah, I think here we can see that exactly. Yeah, maybe the nasal area a little bit lower. And that's really the point, yeah, that we set up firstly the lower. And that's exactly the same when I start with the anteriors, at first at the upper jaw. So then I set up the upper jaw, the anteriors by the upper jaw, the anteriors by the lower jaw, and then I continue with the lower posteriors. Or on the other side, sometimes if we are set up with a setup table, so then it's a little bit different. Then I have exactly contact points to between the setup table and the upper teeth, and then I can also set up the upper posteriors at first. So that's important. You have different possibilities how you set up, but at the end the result should be the same. Yeah, that's important. Okay, so the next point, you know that I changed it. Now I'm ready with the setup of the lower jaw. I can check exactly here the positioning that the posterior teeth should be located at the midline of the alveolar jaw. We need, of course, also enough space here at the lingual side, that we have enough space for the tongue. Yeah, we control that at both sides. Yeah, and then we can continue with the upper posteriors. And so that's exactly the same what I'm doing. Yeah. So I have set up one side, and now I will show you the other side with the upper posteriors.
Will we see the Lego effect that you showed on your presentation, that once you close it fits like a Lego, it goes in like a Lego?
I can show you that with if I have a setup, I can show you that with the contact points.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So then it's exactly the same. First of all, what I have to do, I start with a wax rim. So just a moment. Okay, Darius, is it better now?
Darius, we received a new knife from Queensland right away, and Martina's using it immediately.
Yeah, that's perfect. Very easy to use it. Okay, so that's important. So what I'm doing now, I start here with
There you go.
with the first molar, and you can see that, yeah, that I get exactly the right position between the upper and the lower jaw, and it's exactly true. Yeah, you can really believe me. It's really working. And so, we have the different teeth. We have talked about different posteriors, the cuspiform, the synoform. But here with the MFT, it's exactly the same which you have seen at the movie. Yeah, if we have set up the teeth at the right position at the lower jaw. So what we have to do, we have to fix the tooth. We have to take the centric, and it's finished. Yeah. Last but not least. Yeah. Last but not least. So we have here now our space for the first premolar. Sometimes it's really, sometimes it's a little bit too big, sometimes it's a little bit too small, but then it's possible that we change exactly the position of the canine. Just a moment. Yeah, I have also to do that here. But that's another point that I have prepared the teeth only in wax. Not the teeth, the setup, sorry.
The setup.
Sorry.
So Martina,
Renata
Renata is saying that it's a very beautiful setup. And are the teeth being prepared as in trimmed to prevent coming off in the future? So do you trim the MFT before?
I haven't done that here, but I have to talk about that I have really enough space.
Mm-hmm.
I can show you that. Yeah, if you see the contour of, especially for the posterior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because sometimes. Okay, Petra, if you also do that, I have a little bit problems. Okay, so it's not clear. Yeah, so you can see here this the shape of the premolar. That's the same with the shape of the molar. So that means you have this concave shape,
yeah.
And we haven't to grind too much.
Okay.
It's exactly for the anteriors. I can also show you that. Yeah. So you have also here at the basal side this concave shape that we don't have to grind too much. But of course, it depends to the shape of the jaw. Okay. Sometimes it's really necessary.
Okay.
Yeah. And what you have to do is to grind the occlusal surface.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really very, very seldom because it's really prepared very well to grade the contact points during the centric.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's exactly also anytime the same point. It's not necessary or not often necessary for full dentures, but of course for partial dentures, so then you have to prepare more.
Okay, so I hope, Renata, your question has been answered. So it's a yes and no. It depends on case by case, but mostly they don't need too much pre-prep, let's say.
No, exactly. Yeah, and so here you can see now the result. Yeah, so because now we have set up the complete dentures, the upper and the lower one. Let me see what we can do. I can show you also our contact points. Or not. Just a moment. Yeah, that's anytime. So you know that if you work in wax and you prepare that, sometimes it's changing a little bit. So what we like to get are the contact points. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the upper jaw. At the just a moment, please.
That's it.
Okay. At the palatal side and for the lower one, we like to get the contact points here at the main fissure or also at the proximal ridges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the way. So I can remove now here our pin that you can see, also the setup of the interiors. Yeah, we can open that a little bit, that we can check that we have the parallel setup between the upper and the lower jaw. Yeah, so then the next point, but it depends to the wax try-in. What I'm doing, what I prefer is to make also an individual modulation of the gingiva.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes I hear that it's too much work. Yeah, but I think that's also important for the patient to that they have also a very nice appearance. If they see our dentures, it's only the wax try, of course, but there it's important if the patient is satisfied or not.
Well, ultimately, it's aesthetics, yeah? It falls down to aesthetics,
exactly.
So you improve the aesthetics.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
If we see more or less by the individual surface of the gingiva, so anytime I think it's much better for the patient.
Of course. While you work, I'm going to read you a couple more questions that just popped up. Do we need to use Vita for a better bond?
For the finishing, yes, you should take it. Yeah. So especially with the Vita, it depends. So so anytime if we, and you know that more and more it's common to use, to use also cold cure material.
Cold cure, yes.
Yeah. And so it's really a must. Yeah, to use the Vitacol, because with the Vitacol, you get a reaction between the material by the teeth and the base material.
Mm-hmm.
If we have heat cure material, so we get also a reaction during the heatness.
Okay.
Yeah, but anytime I recommend to use the Vitacol anytime, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And one more. It would be nice to see how the carving has been done. Can you show?
Sure.
Do we have time? We have like 15 minutes left.
15 minutes.
15. 15.
Ah, so okay, that's not so much.
No.
But it's very fast. let me see. I have one prepared. Okay, so I need a little bit space here. So sorry if I change that anytime. So the working place is not so clear. Okay, what I'm doing, first of all, what we have to do is to apply wax. So, and of course, I think you have seen that. I have also prepared that. Yeah. Then I apply the wax, and that's important. So if I apply the wax, I apply that also here in between the teeth. Yeah, it should be really closed completely. Then I can make it smooth. Yeah, I think you can see that. Okay, so to create the surface, I take here Legrand. I think you can see that. Please, Darius. It's really not new. Yeah, but I have done that by myself. Okay, and now I can start. That's only a joke. Just a moment. Okay, so what I'm doing, maybe it's a little bit different to the other working style. So normally what we do, we start here from the gingiva to the teeth. I take the other way, yeah, because I have exactly here the shape by the Legrand, yeah, to reduce the wax exactly at the shape of the teeth, that the body will be free. Yeah, and the neck is fixed at the wax. Yeah, so that's the first step. Then I can clean that. So the next step is to reduce the material. Yeah, to grade at first, and you can see that here exactly. I remove the wax from the middle side to the left and the right side. Then I get directly how is the name in English?
Excess?
I forgot it. Maybe in 2 minutes. Yeah. And so what I do now is to remove the wax to the mucolateral fold, that we get a concave area. Okay, so for our patient cases, so normally we work out the gingiva only till the second premolar, means at the visible area. But here in wax, it's really very fast, and you can do that till the end. Okay, that was the second step. So then I create the papilla. Yeah, so that means anytime the wax should be on the tooth, and it shouldn't be too concave. The modulation of the papillas shouldn't be too concave. Means I remove only the wax to grade the length of the papillas. Okay, that was the third step. So what I'm doing now, I make it a little bit smooth. Can you see that? And then I take the toothbrush to create the surface. Yeah. And at the end, I control that again. Yeah, because also here at the interdental area shouldn't be too much wax. I have also to remove the material here a little bit to the mucolabial fold. Yeah, and then you can see that we have at a very fast, easy, and simple way also the creation of the gingiva.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have done that now and that before. Okay.
Which wax are you using?
Oh. So we don't have our own wax. It's a German company, Merz Dental, and it's called Bremo Echo. It's a nice wax because it's not too pink. It's really very natural, very hard, not too soft. So I really like it. Okay, so I think that we have not enough, really enough time. I would like to show you also the possibility what we can do afterwards if we have made our polymerization and like to grind out the surface. So that's exactly the same. So we can grind out the surface and can prepare here also the characterization for the shape of the gingiva, but it's also possible to create a more individual color by the gingiva with our VMLC. Just a moment, I will show you that because here we have a gingiva kit. It's the VMLC flow. With different shades of the gingiva. We can, after the finishing, we can apply this material, cure it out, and it depends if I reduce the applying. So after the curing, it's possible that we only polish the surface. Yeah, and then you can see that it's more individual, shouldn't be too intense. So sometimes I think you can see that I work a little bit with blue, with dark red, and so on. Yeah, and then it's more individual, more natural, and then you have a nice combination between the teeth and the gingiva.
How many shades of gingiva do we have?
So we have here the complete kit.
Tina has a nice kit right there with her.
We have 5 different. Oh no, you cannot see it. Just a moment. Wait.
It's under the wax.
Yes, I see. No. Okay, can you see that? It's the wrong side. Maybe here you can read it. Yeah, flow gingiva kit, and we have 5 different shades. Not enough space. Yeah, so it's G1, G2 till G5. Yeah, and you can also, that's the gingiva kit, but you can also mix that with a dentine or with.
You can maybe use the over-shoulder camera to show them the kit, but
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll take your word. They'll take your word for
so
it.
Yeah?
They'll take your word for it.
Okay, so I think we are at the end.
I think so.
Yeah.
So firstly, I would like to thank you, Martina, for taking us through this beautiful journey. It was, I think, a great balance between little theory and lots of practice. We received a few questions from the audience, which is nice.
Yeah.
It showed that people were engaged. I would like to remind everyone, before thanking everyone, that if you still have some questions that remained unanswered, please send us an email at info@vita-zahnfabrik, or as Michael Tulay says, -Zahnfabrik for our Australian friends.
Exactly.
It's our Australian joke here. I would like to thank everyone for joining us. By all means, reach out to your, a little bit of commercial side now from my end, reach out to your local dealer. They have an excellent promotional activity, discounts and bundles for you to take this opportunity on MFT. I'm sure that you have some insights from Martina. Reach out to your dealers. They have great promos for you. In the meantime, we wish you health and safety. Stay strong. Lots of lockdowns in your area. Stay well. Reach out to us if you need. And last thing, make sure to follow our social media pages. Make sure that you stay up to date with our virtual IDS options coming and a few webinars coming over. And lastly, I would like to thank our friends and colleagues in the Regie for helping us setting all this up. Thank you very much.
Okay, and all the best also from my side. Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.